Hey, what's up? It's Zax. I finally got a little bit of time away from work and WoW to record a video, so I figured I'd try out a quick little opinion piece on something I've been thinking about lately, the race to world first. The race has gotten absolutely massive over the past couple years in terms of viewership, and it's undoubtedly going to keep growing. And Blizzard has done a pretty good job with recognizing its significance and somewhat facilitating its success, with targeted tuning, hotfixes, and communication. But more importantly, Blizzard has made the right decision in generally staying out of the way and just letting it happen as a community thing. It's obviously been great. However, I think we're at a point now where Blizzard should take action to address the biggest issues with the race in order to keep it growing as much as possible. Because, after all, more viewership and publicity for the game is very good for Blizzard. If you're interested at all in the race, you've probably heard some of the World First Raiders and others talk about these issues and the changes they'd like to see. But across the board, everyone seems to agree that the biggest issue by far is that not all of the contending guilds get their raid at the same time or get their first weekly reset at the same time. Now, I've heard a bunch of solutions for this issue, but I haven't really heard someone lay the options out and analyze them to kind of help people understand the implications of each one. So I'm going to try to do that. So first of all, real quick, why is the starting time and reset time thing an issue? Well, it sort of goes without saying that getting a head start in any race is an advantage. It immediately adds a feeling of unfairness, which spoils the spirit of the competition a little bit, even for the guilds that get the head start. For the World First race in particular, the head start advantage gets mostly diminished by longer maintenance times, bugged bosses, and giving the later guilds information that can make their progression smoother. But even after all that, the head start is still a slight advantage, especially when comparing US and Asian guilds. So that's whack. But then you add in the weekly reset timing, and that's where things get extra whack. Long story short, you could have a situation where a guild from each region is working on the last boss on Monday night, but they all just need a bit more gear to kill it. Then the US weekly reset happens on Tuesday morning, the US guild reclears Mythic and kills the last boss in a few hours, while the EU and Asian guilds still haven't even had their reset and opportunity to get more gear. That would be tragic, and this exact thing almost happened in Castle Nathria, as well as a couple other tiers in BFA. It's just a disaster waiting to happen. Ultimately, these advantages make it less appealing for guilds in regions outside the US to compete in the race, and they dull the hype of the competition for the audience as well, altogether limiting the viewership and hype for the event as a whole. Now for the real reason for this whole video, what can Blizzard do about it? From what I've heard and thought about myself, there are only 3 general options. Number 1, they can do nothing, of course. Number 2, they can do a global release and weekly reset. Or number 3, they can create separate World First race servers that have the same release and reset. So let's get into each of the options. Number 1, they can do nothing. This one is the most boring, and knowing Blizzard, it's also the most likely. But at the end of the day, the viewership of the race is huge and will continue growing every tier without them doing anything about the time differences. So Blizzard doesn't need to do anything. And as I'll explain, the consequences for all the other options they have are more complicated than you might think. Number 2, they can do a global release and global weekly reset. This is the option you'll hear people bring up most often because, well, it's obvious. And if Blizzard can do a global release for an entire expansion, why couldn't they do one for the raid? I'm sure they could. However, for this change to work and really be relevant, they'd also have to change how the weekly reset works for the first 3 weeks of the raid at least. And that's where things get really complicated. The weekly resets have been the way they are for longer than I can remember, with the US getting theirs on Tuesday morning, EU on Wednesday, and Asia on Thursday. Now, I'm not going to pretend to know all the reasons for why this is a thing, but it kind of goes without saying that people are used to it, and it's probably better for Blizzard. Changing these resets permanently, or even just for raids, would likely have a lot of unforeseen consequences on the player base and Blizzard. And it's understandable that Blizzard might not be willing to risk these consequences for an event that maybe a couple hundred players participate in, out of however many millions of players there are. So the way I see it, Blizzard would have to find an incredibly clever way of pulling this off, or the risks simply won't outweigh the potential benefits for them, even if it would be pretty awesome. So if changes that affect the entire player base are actually too risky, all that's left is changes that only affect the racing guilds, which brings me to number 3. They can create separate World First race servers that have the same release and reset. Right off the bat, we know this option is easily possible. Blizzard already has servers like this for the MDI and Arena World Championships, so of course they could do the same thing for the Race to World First. So this option already satisfies what I think are the 2 biggest factors for Blizzard: cost and player base impact. It's cheap because they already know how to do it, and it only really affects the players that are participating in the event. Seems like a no-brainer. However, there are hundreds of details that Blizzard would need to decide about how exactly these servers would work. Like, who has access to them? How does gear work on them? How do consumables work? Can gear or achievements be brought back to live servers? When exactly is the release and reset? And on and on and on. By the way, I plan on making another video going over those details more specifically, but believe me, there's a lot to consider. Ultimately, Blizzard could talk with the top guilds to make better decisions about them, and I think any guild actually going for World First is more concerned about there being a level playing field for the race than getting the details exactly right. Not to mention that it can be improved every tier going forward. There may be other reasons for Blizzard to not want to implement these servers too, like unforeseen consequences with the rest of the player base somehow, or simply just not wanting to be more involved and accountable for the success of the race. Because they aren't really getting much hate, so to speak, for how the race is now. Maybe they just wouldn't want to mess up some of the details of the servers and stir the hate up. Who knows? Alright, so to summarize a little bit, I don't think there's any chance whatsoever that we'll get a global release and reset of the raid. There are just too many risks and challenges for Blizzard for a relatively small benefit to them. So I think we're left with them either doing nothing or implementing race servers. They'll probably do nothing because the race is awesome and growing as it is, even with the obvious flaw, but I think there is a small chance that they would implement race servers. And oh my god, imagine how good the race could be if they got it right. More guilds could actually compete in the race and it would probably be closer than ever. No more 16-hour time difference argument BS. And maybe the other smaller issues with the race would end up being fixed too. Like the hundreds of millions of gold required to be spent on BOEs, the absurd amount of community siphoning split runs for gear, or needing to be a PvP professional to get your raiding gear. Okay, maybe that last one is just a personal thing, but hey, think of the possibilities. Needless to say, race servers definitely have my vote. Anyway, let me know what you think about this whole starting time and reset time situation. Do you want Blizzard to do anything about it? Would you rather see a global release or race servers? And how do you think the race servers should work? I'm super curious to see what you all think about it. More videos are on the way, so hit the like button and join our Discord to keep up with everything Ready Check Pull. See you next time.